Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, President Donald Trump takes a sledgehammer to the globalist elites in Davos. We'll get into the details on that. Plus, a winter storm watch continues as we track a major winter storm that is likely to affect most of North Carolina. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning, as always, is brought to you by Melissa Gott and the amazing team over at the Law Group in Wilmington. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on as we roll through the program on this busy Thursday. We'll also get into some of the interesting weather conditions that we could be seeing in the next couple of days as well as we roll through the program. Oh boy, it is absolutely phenomenal to see President Donald Trump in action. As we talked about earlier in the week, the president was scheduled and did in fact attend the World Economic Forum, the WEF 2026 event in Davos. He has been there for the last 2 days. He was there on Wednesday, spoke early in the day, Eastern time because of the time change. He was speaking between 4 and 5 a.m. This morning as well, just laying out the American blueprint, laying out the American plan, and taking a sledgehammer to the global elites, taking a sledgehammer to the central currency, the one world government, a liberal elite that love to swarm at an event like Davos, where over the past couple of years, the discussion and conversation has been doing away with physical currency, forcing everybody to digital banking where you no longer will have physical dollars or money that you can hold in your hand. And of course, the risk and the concern in that is one that we have seen play out, is that when you are on the wrong side of an issue, these digital banks, these digital currencies just magically get shut off. You're debanked. You are barred from doing work with a financial institution. That's what they want. If you can no longer have access to cash and physical currency, then these liberal elites can control what you do financially. They can control what you do with your money, and there's really nothing that you're going to be able to do. And we're already seeing a lot of that. I mean, how many times do you go into a place now and see no cash? You've got to pay with a debit or credit card. There's no longer an option to use cash. That is all part of this globalist one world, new world order plan that is pushed by these liberal elites. And Donald Trump is not putting up with it. He is not backing down from it. He is not letting this continue. And, you know, he is a very interesting character is probably the nice way to put it. But I would imagine that many of the individuals in Davos, Switzerland yesterday were very, very uncomfortable. I'm sure that they were maybe pulling at their collar a little bit. They were sweating listening to what President Donald Trump was saying, because it did not paint a good picture, did not paint a good situation for these individuals and these entities that want to go forward with this these kind of incredibly disastrous policies. This is how the president opened his comments at the World Economic Forum yesterday.
I've come to this year's World Economic Forum with truly phenomenal news from America. Yesterday marked the one-year anniversary of my inauguration, and today, after 12 months back in the White House, our economy is booming, growth is exploding, productivity is surging, investment is soaring, incomes are rising, inflation has been defeated, our previously open and dangerous border is closed and virtually impenetrable, and the United States is in the midst of the fastest and most dramatic economic turnaround in our country's history. Under the Biden administration, America was plagued by the nightmare of stagflation, meaning low growth, and high inflation, a recipe for misery, failure, and decline. But now, after just 1 year of my policies, we are witnessing the exact opposite. virtually no inflation, and extraordinarily high economic growth. Growth like I believe you'll see very shortly our country has never seen before, perhaps no country has ever seen before.
Laying out what a successful year it's been. And, looking at the calendar, it's been literally just over a year that he took and swore his oath to office, becoming the 47th president of the United States. And it is truly remarkable. You've heard me say this before. Compare and contrast what you saw over 4 years of the Biden administration to what you've seen in the span of just 12 months under Trump. I mean, it's been a year. And let's also not pretend that, yes, obviously there's a lot that goes on in the first, you take your oath of office and you get into the position. But there's a little bit of time there in which you've got to get your team around you. Everybody's got to figure out what's going on. I mean, there's a little bit of a lag period. I don't know if that's 30 or 60 days before you really get things working and up to speed. So it's been, if you really break it down, less than a year since Donald Trump took office. And the things that he has accomplished, the things that he has been successful at, the list of those things just goes on and on. That was more of just a general open. The United States is back. It is better than ever. And it did not take long into his comments, just a couple of minutes before he talked about how the U.S. is on the right path and the rest of the world, well, frankly, they are not.
This afternoon, I want to discuss how we have achieved this economic miracle, how we intend to raise living standards for our citizens to levels never seen before, and perhaps how you too and the places where you come from can do much better by following what we're doing, because certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way. That's in a very negative way. And I love Europe, and I want to see Europe go good, but it's not heading in the right direction. In recent decades, it became conventional wisdom in Washington and European capitals that the only way to grow a modern Western economy was through ever-increasing government spending, unchecked mass migration, and endless foreign imports. The consensus was that so-called dirty jobs and heavy industry should be sent elsewhere, that affordable energy should be replaced by the Green New Scam, and that countries could be propped up by importing new and entirely different populations from faraway lands. This was the path that sleepy Joe Biden administration and many other Western governments very foolishly followed, turning their backs on everything that makes nations rich and powerful and strong. And there's so much potential in so many nations. The result was record budget and trade deficits and a growing sovereign deficit driven by the largest wave of mass migration in human history. We've never seen anything like it. Quite frankly, many parts of our world are being destroyed before our very eyes, and the leaders don't even understand what's happening. And the ones that do understand aren't doing anything about it.
He lays out the clear contrast that exists, at least right now. It maybe wasn't as clear of a difference before, but it is now the clear difference between how many other developed nations, most of them throughout Europe, are operating and governing. He talks about the issues, mass migration, talks about manufacturing, talks about the economic and the energy discussions and concerns that are taking place all throughout the rest of the world right now, many of which are leading to very disastrous results. You want to talk about immigration being a problem? Yes, we talk about it here in the United States. Obviously, I focus primarily on what's going on stateside, a lot of focus on what's going on here in North Carolina. It's where we live. But man, you start looking at European media coverage of immigration, and as the president notes and kind of highlighting some anecdotes from some of his friends and colleagues that are world travelers and have been going to places throughout Europe for probably decades now, they've got a major, major problem with immigration on their hands. Many of these places, as the president notes, are unrecognizable from years past. And this is not just an opinion of the president. This is an opinion of the individuals that live in these places. This is the opinion of the nationals that live there. They are very frustrated with the immigration policy. They are very frustrated with the energy policy and the government policies that they are seeing out of many of these places. And as the president, ended his comments, they are either too stupid to know what's going on, or they're just allowing it to happen. And I'm not sure, honestly, which one is worse. If I'm being honest with you, I'm not sure which situation is worse for the people of Europe. And had Kamala Harris been successful in November of 2024, the United States would be in the exact same bucket. Unchecked migration, out of control inflation, disastrous governmental policies that would make my life and your life worse each and every day. And I am so incredibly thankful that President Donald Trump was successful. I'm so incredibly thankful that the American people woke up in 2024, looked around, saw what was happening around them, and said, oh my God, we don't want anything to do with this. These policies are a freaking disaster. We don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. They were very clear with that during the election of 2024. And fortunately, now we are reaping the benefits, reaping the rewards, reaping the results of those elections. So the president is in Davos. He's at the World Economic Forum. As I mentioned, he's taking a sledgehammer to these globalists, these disastrous globalist policies that are being pushed by most nations in Europe. The EU is the driving force behind all of this, which is the framework for this kind of one world government. Countries no longer have the sovereignty to govern themselves. They've got to answer to this higher power, which is the European Union. It's a mess. And one of the big issues that exists in Europe right now, outside of immigration, which we just talked about, is energy. We've talked here stateside about the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam, this attempt to move away from traditional forms of energy, this attempt to go all in on wind and solar, which are incredibly expensive, incredibly unreliable, and not good forms of electrical generation, at least right now. It is way worse over in Europe, and the president had no problem calling out many of these European nations, many of which were sitting in the room listening to the president.
Because of my landslide election victory, the United States avoided the catastrophic energy collapse which befell every European nation that pursued the Green New Scam, perhaps the greatest hoax in history. The Green New Scam, windmills all over the place, destroy your land. Destroy your land. Every time that goes around, you lose $1,000. You're supposed to make money with energy, not lose money. Here in Europe, we've seen the fate that the radical left tried to impose on America. They tried very hard. Germany now generates 22% less electricity than it did in 2017. And it's not the current chancellor's fault. He's solving the problem. He's going to do a great job. But what they did before he got there, I guess that's why he got there. And electricity prices are 64% higher. The United Kingdom produces just 1/3 of the total energy from all sources that it did in 1999. Think of that, 1/3. And they're sitting on top of the North Sea, one of the greatest reserves anywhere in the world, but they don't use it. And that's one reason why their energy has reached catastrophically low levels with equally high prices. High prices, very low levels. Think of that.
I'm going to pause the president right there because this really needs to be honed in on. Think about the situation that we saw here in the United States. Thankfully, it has been stopped by this administration, but the situation unfolding in Europe right now. You have got situations where these left-wing environmental groups are leading the government down a road that only goes to complete and total disaster. When you as a nation can no longer produce electricity in an effective, affordable manner, you are failing your country. You are failing one of the most basic responsibilities that a country and a nation has. And you are seeing that all throughout portions of Europe right now. The left tried doing it here in the United States. Fortunately, the people revolted back against it. More from President Trump in Davos.
At 1/3, and you're sitting on top of the North Sea, and they like to say, well, you know, that's depleted. It's not depleted. It's got 500 years. They haven't even found the oil. The North Sea is incredible. They don't let anybody drill. Environmentally, they don't let them drill. They make it impossible for the oil companies to go. They take 92% of the revenues. So the oil companies say, we can't do it. They came to see me. Is there anything you can do? I want Europe to do great. I want UK to do great. They're sitting on one of the greatest energy sources in the world, and they don't use it. In fact, their electricity prices have soared 139%. There are windmills all over Europe. There are windmills all over the place, and they are losers. One thing I've noticed is that the more windmills a country has, the more money that country loses, and the worse that country is doing. China makes almost all of the windmills, and yet I haven't been able to find any wind farms in China. Did you ever think of that? It's a good way of looking at it. They're smart. China's very smart. They make them, they sell them for a fortune. They sell them to the stupid people that buy them, but they don't use them themselves.
What a great point there from President Trump. It does make you think, doesn't it? Makes you wonder. You've got all of these windmills, all of them, of course, being produced in China, as the president notes. Yet China themselves, they're not using windmills. They're still using coal and gas-fired power plants. Why? Because it's a very effective and very useful way to generate electricity. But many of the conversations that we continue to see are not really based in a whole lot of logic. They're all politically driven. And the politically driven discussions lead to disaster. President Trump also talked about Greenland. This has been a very hot topic over the last couple of days as well. Here's the president on that.
I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark. Tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power, much greater than people even understand. I think they found that out 2 weeks ago in Venezuela. We saw this in World War II, when Denmark fell to Germany after just 6 hours of fighting and was totally unable to defend either itself or Greenland. So the United States was then compelled, we did it, we felt an obligation to do it, to send our own forces to hold the Greenland territory, and hold it we did at great cost and expense. They didn't have a chance of getting on it, and they tried. Denmark knows that. We literally set up bases on Greenland for Denmark. We fought for Denmark. We weren't fighting for anyone else. We were fighting to save it for Denmark. Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. So we did it for ourselves also. And then after the war, which we won it big. Without us, right now you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But we gave it back. But how ungrateful are they now? So now our country and the world face much greater risks than it did ever before because of missiles, because of nuclear, because of weapons of warfare that I can't even talk about.
So the president lays out the story there going back to World War II. And of course, all of the outrage from those on the political left here in the U.S. has been over the last couple of weeks. The president is going to use military force. He is going to deploy the military to take control of Greenland. Well, the president commented on that as well.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that.
Uh-oh.
Okay, now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
Well, that completely destructs that entire argument that's been made for weeks now. President's going to use military force. He's going to send men and women of the U.S. military into Greenland and hostily take over the territory. Yet another bit of left-wing propaganda, more fear-mongering from those on the political left, more fear-mongering from those in the media that this was going to happen. And the only reason I say this is because I've been watching it. I sit in my office for the vast majority of the day, and I have 4 television networks on next to me. I have Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and BBC. Those are the 4 networks that I monitor throughout the day. And over the last couple of weeks now, throughout various large chunks of the day, there have been major discussions on all 4, really 2 of the networks, CNN and now MS, no longer MSNBC, now MS Now, about Trump and Greenland. And about how he is going to use military force, about how it's unconstitutional, about how he's going to start a war. And the only reason I know this is because I've seen it. Now, I don't listen to it. I just kind of glance over. If something's interesting, I'll turn up the volume. But I see the lower thirds. I see the graphics that they have on screen. And that's been the fear-mongering now for weeks. That this is what President Donald Trump is going to do. This is how he's going to do it. I've seen the articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post and everywhere else throughout media. Yet, we just heard from the man himself. We just heard from the guy who is going to determine and decide, and the only one that can decide whether there would be military involvement at all. And he said yesterday in Davos at the World Economic Forum that we are not going to use military action to take over the country of Greenland, which is under the flag of Denmark. So there's yet another fearmonger narrative that has been dispelled, dismissed. So I guess all of the experts, all of the analysts that have been working around the clock, the guests on CNN, the guests on MSNBC that have been talking about this for weeks now, I guess everything that they've talked about is now null and void, right? Because President Trump admitted that that was not going to happen. President Trump also talked a little bit about NATO. You heard that in his comments as it related to portions or all of Greenland. And, this has been something that we saw in the first Trump administration, and we're seeing it again now. That the United States is backing out of many of these national or international organizations in which the United States and President Trump, I think rightfully so, believes that the United States is getting taken advantage of. For example, the World Health Organization is now done. The U.S. is leaving the WHO. This was announced early in the administration, but has come to reality at Davos. The United States has officially withdrawn from the World Health Organization. Another one world government, another bureaucracy organization that the United States gains nothing from. And we see the similar tack with all of these entities. The United States spends the most amount of money, puts the most amount of work and effort in, and gets arguably the least return out of it. We see this all the time. We've seen it with NATO. We saw it with the Paris Climate Accords and all this other garbage that the United States has gotten involved in. And the president didn't shy back on NATO either.
It's a very small ask compared to what we have given them for many, many decades. But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us. If we gave them the call, gentlemen, we are being attacked. We're under attack by such and such a nation. I know them all very well. I'm not sure that they'd be there. I know we'd be there for them. I don't know that they'd be there for us. So with all of the money we expend, with all of the blood, sweat, and tears, I don't know that they'd be there for us.
I think President Trump is absolutely correct. When the world needs something, when NATO needs something, the United States is always the first one in line. We're a very prosperous, we're a very generous nation. But reality has come to fruition on this, and the reality is one that is very simple. All of these groups, NATO, all of these nations, They've taken advantage of the United States. They've taken advantage of our generosity. They've taken advantage of the fact that the U.S. is always there and is always ready. Look at what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. This war is brewing, bordering multiple members of NATO. And it, once again, is the United States that is the largest funder of the war. It is the United States that is more involved than anybody else throughout Europe. Why is that the case? It's because this organization is useless without the U.S. Many of these organizations are useless without the United States of America. And so when the president highlights that if the call ever rang and the United States needed help, I don't think NATO would do a damn thing. If I'm being frank and honest with you, I don't think they'd do anything. They'd send over their sympathy. They'd write a nice letter to the United States. We've got your back. We've got your full support. Great. So it's a letter writing organization. If that's the case, then we should cut the funding 100%. How much money do you need to purchase some stationery paper? How much money do you need to send a piece of mail postage internationally? It can't be more than a couple of bucks, right? Just send a basic letter. NATO wouldn't be there for the United States. That's the sad reality. And that's why I mentioned at the open, this was the sledgehammer that Donald Trump brought to the New World Order, to these one world government cronies that crawl all around the World Economic Forum and have been crawling around Davos now for years. Turning our attention back stateside, earlier this week, we talked about the president's plan for housing, and he said he would lay this out more at the World Economic Forum, and well, he did.
Home ownership has always been a symbol of health and vigor of American society, but that goal fell out of reach for millions and millions of people in the Biden era because interest rates went up so high. Today, I'm taking action to bring back this bedrock of the American dream. In recent years, Wall Street giants and institutional investment firms, many of you are here, many of you are good friends of mine, many of you are supporters. Sorry to do this, Joe, I'm so sorry. But you've driven up housing prices by purchasing hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, and it's been a great investment for them. Often as much as 10% of houses on the market. You know, the crazy thing is a person can't get depreciation on a house, but when a corporation buys it, they get depreciation. Okay, that's something we're going to have to think about, too. I don't know if too many people think about that. You buy a corporation, they buy 500 houses. They buy hundreds of thousands. They buy 500 houses. They can take depreciation. A person sweats and works and buys one house, they can't. But homes are built for people, not for corporations, and America will not become a nation of renters. We're not going to do that. That's why I have signed an executive order banning large institutional investors from buying single-family homes. It's just not fair to the public. They're not able to buy a house. And I'm calling on Congress to pass that ban into permanent law, and I think they will.
And they need to. I mean, I have been a longtime fan of Dave Ramsey. I've listened to him for years, and Clark Howard. All of those individuals, anybody in the financial sector will tell you very clearly that one of the fastest ways to generate generational wealth, to leave your children off better than you were, is with real estate, property, homes, land, things of that nature. And that is becoming ever harder to do in the United States, in large part due to many of these things that the president just talked about. Large corporations, we talked about it on Monday, purchasing up all brand new housing developments, paying cash for every single house, completely boxing out the single family housing consumer that would like to purchase those properties. The president continued on housing.
Last week, the average 30-year mortgage rate dropped below 6% for the first time in many years. Another major factor in driving up housing costs was the mass invasion of our borders. And I have to say one thing about housing, because nobody ever says this.
Before the president says that, that also needs to continue to be talked about as well. When you've allowed tens of millions of people into the United States, they got to live somewhere. They've got to have somewhere to put their head down at night. And so that is yet another factor that has led to the skyrocketing in property values that we've seen all across the United States over the last couple of years.
I am very protective of people that already own a house, of which we have millions and millions and millions. And because we have had such a good run, the house values have gone up tremendously. And these people have become wealthy. They weren't wealthy. They become wealthy because of their house. And every time you make it more and more and more affordable for somebody to buy a house cheaply, you're actually hurting the value of those houses, obviously, because the one thing works in tandem with the other. And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt the value of people that own a house who, for the first time in their lives, are walking around the streets of whatever city they're in, very proud that their house is worth $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Now, if I want to really crush the housing market, I could do that so fast and people could buy houses, but you would destroy a lot of people that already have houses. In some cases, they've mortgaged their house, and the mortgage would be very low, and all of a sudden the mortgage without any changes becomes very high, and they end up losing the house. I'm not going to hurt, and I speak with Scott, who's doing a fantastic job, and Howard, who's doing a fantastic job, and all of my people. And I always say, look, I can crush the hell out of the market. We can drop interest rates to a level, and that's one thing we do want to do. That's natural. That's good for everybody. The dropping of the interest rates, we should be paying a much lower interest rate than we are. We should be paying the lowest interest rate of any country in the world, because without the United States, you don't have a country.
And the president, again, honing in on this concept of home ownership, the wealth that is able to generate for American consumers, for single families, for individuals that are trying to generate some level of wealth. There is not many people that would argue against the fact that real estate and property is one of the most effective, affordable, useful ways to do that. And so as he says, we could get everybody in a home, but we'd have to completely crush the housing market. And that's something he doesn't want to do. He seems to have a very keen interest in continuing to allow people to generate that level of wealth through property transactions. And I think he's absolutely spot on about that. The president also talked a little bit about debt, talked about some credit card debt as well. We'll hear his comments on that coming up. Talked about fraud. That is, of course, a major discussion as well. Made an interesting comment on that. Plus was asked about Russia and Ukraine as that war continues to rage in portions of Europe. We'll get into those details coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Before that, I want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program, and let you know that when legal challenges arise, some good, some bad, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of our state. We're talking about housing this morning. If you're looking and you're in the business of purchasing either a house or real estate, you're going to need an attorney to look over those documents. If so, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and any issues that might arise are resolved promptly. Great news, folks. They are located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away. Give Melissa Gott and her team a call at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com, 910-251-6088, or their website, lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate Melissa and her team for their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, we'll grab a quick break. On the other side, we'll continue a couple final clips from Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday. Spoke earlier this morning as well. We'll get into that, plus an interesting, very interesting winter weather forecast for this weekend. All those details coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Thursday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Thursday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show as we continue our coverage of President Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the annual meeting that takes place every year. It is a meeting that is filled with the liberal elite, the globalist elite from all across the world. And President Donald Trump came in and hit him with a sledgehammer, just completely taking to task these disastrous policies that we see across the world that leave people worse off, leave them with less money in their pocket, and are generally described as very disastrous for almost anybody that is involved. Before the break, the president talked about home ownership, talked about the housing market, is obviously a big focus of his, is the economy, as it should be. That is one of the major driving factors that causes people to vote. It pushes them to voting locations. If they're not happy with the current economic condition, they tend to vote against the people currently in charge. The president also had some interesting ideas and commentary on credit card debt as well. Take a listen to this.
One of the biggest barriers to saving for a down payment has been surging credit card debt. The profit margin for credit card companies now exceeds 50%, one of the biggest. And they charge Americans interest rates of 28%, 30%, 31%, 32%. Whatever happened to usury? So to help our citizens recover from the Biden disaster, all caused by this horrible precedent, I'm asking Congress to cap credit card interest rates at 10% for 1 year.
Interesting.
And this will help millions of Americans save for a home. They have no idea they're paying 28%. They go out there a little late in their payment and they end up losing their house. It's terrible.
It is terrible. And, instead of teaching your kids about pronouns in the public school system, instead of teaching them how to correctly announce and predict what somebody's pronouns might be, this has been a long time frustration that I've had. We have a financial literacy problem in the United States. We spend all this time talking about all this other stuff, yet we spend almost arguably zero, if any time whatsoever, on financial literacy. I'm a strong believer that the public education or private education system should be teaching individuals how to become useful, successful, productive members of our society. Yes, you need to learn to read. Yes, you need to learn to write. Yes, you need to learn how to do some level of math or arithmetic. No, not taking away from that at all. But we are failing our next generation when we teach them nothing as it relates to financial literacy. When we provide them little, if any, information about that. We should be teaching children that overall debt is not a good thing. We should be teaching them that using credit cards is generally not a good thing. And the reason why, as the president just laid out, is due to sky-high interest rates. I don't know what the average is, but it's in the mid or upper 20s. So that is the situation that is strangling many Americans financially. They can't afford to get ahead. Something catastrophic happens, maybe the loss of a job or something like that. You build up some debt on your credit card and you can never dig out of the hole because every single month you're rolling over a 23% interest on your outstanding payment. And so it creates this cascade effect, which means that Americans cannot get ahead. Now, the president says he's going to direct Congress to limit it at 10%. I don't know if that's even plausible or feasible. Presumably it is, since he's mentioning it. Is that the right rate? We've got some comments coming in saying maybe that 10% is too low given the risk of credit card users. So maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but there's no question about it. There is a major problem there. When you look at, and I remember we went through this probably a couple months ago, we looked at the current status of the U.S. consumer, and it's miserable. Something like almost 50%, if not more than 50% of people are carrying a balance on their credit card every single month, paying these sky-high interest rates. So how are you ever supposed to get ahead? That's one of the issues that this president sees and is calling out these major credit card companies, as he notes, that are generating about a 50% profit in terms of revenue, which is a major, major amount. He even talks about usury as it relates to that. So smart stuff there from the president. And I've mentioned this before. For the Republicans to be successful in the midterm elections coming up later this year, one of the major things that Trump and the Republicans have to get right is the economy. It is almost always the largest issue that drives people to the polls. And so if the president can provide more economic relief, more economic success to the American people, there is a very good chance Republicans beat out the norm, which is, of course, getting destroyed in the midterms, and can have some level of success. Speaking of money, the president was asked a question about the fraud situation and made a very interesting point about that as well. Take a listen to this.
If you take a look at Minnesota, $19 billion in fraud and other things. People going to airports, they came into the country, they don't have 10 cents, and they're leaving with hundreds of thousands of cash in their bags. When we get to that, and our DOJ, Pam, and Todd, and all the people that work over there, and all of the people that work in here, I can tell you, Scott Bessent is working on that. It's a priority, right? You have your whole team. We're in there looking for where this money is coming from, how much it is. It could be more than $19 billion. Can you believe that? That's just one state. If we were able to cut out 50% of the fraud, 50%, and we should be able to do better than that, we would have a balanced budget without having to talk about even growth.
That's a shocking comment there from President Trump. And it's one that I saw he's getting a lot of flack for on social media. People are saying that's not true. I don't know if it's 50%, but there is no question about it. If you, at all levels of government, because you got to remember, this stuff kind of trickles down. You've got state programs that receive federal funding. You've got local programs that receive state funding, where the state funding comes from the federal government. It's very much a hierarchy of how that rolls down. If we were able to cut down on the amount of fraud that exists in the United States, the president notes, we could be looking at a situation where we get to some level of revenue neutral, where we are able to balance our budget. I don't think the overall concept there is inherently wrong. There is so much waste, so much fraud, so much abuse at every level of government. If we were able to get that in check, we would likely be in a much better financial situation and financial position. And he says he's got his team on it, and I have no reason to doubt him as it relates to that whatsoever. Final clip from the president's comments at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday. He was asked about Russia and Ukraine and put both of the leaders on blast, calling them stupid, saying they got to get to the table on this thing.
What happens is oftentimes we'll have a deal with Russia. Russia's set, and President Zelensky will not do it. You saw that when he was in the Oval Office. I was not happy. And then we'll have President Zelensky wants to make a deal, and Putin doesn't want to make the deal. It's a very difficult balance, and it's big time, and it is, to use a word, it's a bloodbath. It's horrible what's happening. It's a drone war. The drones are killing, thousands of people a week, thousands. We have to get it stopped. So I believe they're at a point now. I'm going to meet with President Zelensky later today. I believe they're at a point now where they can come together and get a deal done. And if they don't, they're stupid. That goes for both of them. And I know they're not stupid, but if they don't get this done, they are stupid.
I've made this point now for years, and it seems like it is as time goes on, my assumption on this continues to be more and more accurate. I'm not sure that either of those two leaders actually want to end the war. I've made this point now for years. There have been opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to bring this thing to a close, and neither seems willing to do it. I'm not sure that, obviously, they're not happy with the death and destruction that's going on, but neither are truly willing to come to the table and bring this thing to a close. The president's been trying. He's given both leaders every possible opportunity to do so, and he's growing ever frustrated about it. NATO, as we talked about earlier, isn't doing really anything as it relates to the Russia-Ukraine conflict as compared to the United States, and so the war rages on. He says they're stupid if they don't get this thing under control, and I think he's absolutely spot on about that. It is so refreshing to see President Trump in that element. It is so refreshing to see a situation in which these world leaders, these one world government, these central bank currency, these globalist liberal elites having all of their phenomenal plans and all of their phenomenal ideas shot down by President Donald Trump in real time. This is something that is not normal. No, at a conference like this, I've been following the World Economic Forum for the better part of a decade. Every single year, I listen to a lot of the talks. I listen to all of the pandering. I listen to the discussion and conversation that takes place. Very, very infrequently do you have somebody like President Donald Trump, and it doesn't have to just be Trump, it could be any world leader, stand up and rip away these concepts, rip away these ideas in real time. The reality is one that is very simple. Trump doesn't care. He's not in the business of the EU. He's not in the business of NATO. He's not in the business of the WHO or the UN or any of these other or one world government organizations. He is in the business of America. He is in the business of America first. Many of the policies, many of the ideas, many of the concepts pushed by these people are bad for America. And we've seen it seep in. The Green New Deal, also known as the Green New Scam, where do you think that stuff comes from? It's these environmental wackos, these environmental activists that have been pushing these disastrous ideas at conferences like Davos now for decades. President Trump says, no more. We're not doing it. We're not playing ball. We're not playing this game anymore. And he says he's just not going to do it. So very, very refreshing to see. There is apparently a framework deal as it relates to Greenland. I'm not holding out a lot of hope on that. We've heard a lot from the president about frameworks as it relates to tariffs over the last year. Very few, if any, of those have come to fruition. So I'm not really holding out hope on him saying there's a framework deal. I want to see a deal. I'm sick of the framework stuff. Yes, obviously you have to start somewhere, but he uses this word a lot, and none of it really, in large part, has actually played out in practicality. So I agree with the president that there's a lot of strategic and military advantages of having some level of control over Greenland. I think it needs to be done in the right way. The president has made it clear that he's not going to use military force to do that. So there's going to have to be a deal that's worked out. He lambasted and put NATO on blast, calling for them to make that happen. And so now we just kind of wait and see exactly how that plays out and what that looks like. So that is our coverage of President Donald Trump as it relates to Davos and the World Economic Forum. We'll see. I believe he's scheduled to leave later today, their time, and make his way back to the United States. So anything else relevant that comes out, we'll bring it to you right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right. Well, it is time to talk about the weather, and I wish I had more confidence. I wish I had a better strategy and a better idea, but things are still very, very up in the air, which is a concern because here we sit Thursday morning just before 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, and things are still pretty uncertain as it relates to a couple of the major weather models. We're going to first take a look. This is the American forecasting system known as the GFS, and we will play this out as it relates to the winter weather that we could be seeing over the next couple of days. You can see as we get into portions of Saturday, obviously the storm system is moving eastward, so things will start to deteriorate in portions of western and central North Carolina before they continue to make their way east. However, according to the GFS, by late night on Saturday, southeastern North Carolina, which of course would include the Wilmington area, will be dealing with portions of freezing rain. This is late Saturday night, and as the Saturday night rolls on, you can see yet another round of freezing rain as we get into the early morning hours on Sunday, before some mixing takes place, some back and forth with freezing rain before the system turns to more rain and moves out of the area. The latest GFS calling for a crippling ice storm across the southern portions of the United States, with as much as maybe 2+ inches of ice in portions in and around Atlanta, Georgia, which would absolutely cripple the city there. Across portions of southeastern North Carolina, looking at anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch of ice. That's the GFS model, the American model. Now, the European model continues to show a very different story. Here is the European model as we head through the day. On Saturday and into Sunday, you see freezing rain continue across most of the state of North Carolina. However, something interesting to note, rain predominantly for southeastern North Carolina. The European model seemingly indicating at this point that some warm air is going to get kind of sucked in behind this storm and would allow temperatures to rise just above the freezing limit, 32 degrees. And with that, it would be a predominantly rain event here across the area. Things seem to be trending. This is the good news, at least for when I say southeast North Carolina, I'm essentially talking about Wilmington, because as you get into portions of other portions of southeastern North Carolina, the ability for freezing rain is much more likely. But in the immediate, more coastal areas, portions of New Hanover, Pender, and Brunswick County, it seems like there is a growing trend, and this can change, but it seems like there is a growing trend as it relates to more rain than ice. Still the possibility of some mixing early on with this storm, but the concept of a major ice storm with the GFS continues to remain low. Here is the briefing from yesterday afternoon with the National Weather Service here in Wilmington. They seemingly are still on the side of the GFS model, showing anywhere between a 40 and 25% chance of ice accumulation, freezing rain across the area. This number has backed off a little bit as it relates to a moderate winter impact. Most of southeastern North Carolina still high, but again, the coastal areas, those folks in New Hanover, portions of Pender and Brunswick County, those odds are backing down as well. So I would say that by early tomorrow, pretty much throughout the day today and into the overnight hours, we should have a much better idea as to exactly what those impacts are going to look like for portions of southeastern North Carolina. Here is the threat and timing according to the National Weather Service. Things really start to deteriorate overnight Saturday through most of the day on Sunday and potentially into portions of the day on Monday. This is due to the fact that that is not going to warm up immediately after this storm. That is what we typically see. We get a big snow event, we get an ice event. Typically, temperatures rebound pretty quickly. That is not going to happen, at least in the immediate aftermath of this storm. Looking at the 7-day forecast here from WECT News, temperatures are going to be very cold Monday and Tuesday. Low temperatures in the 20s, maybe even getting into the teens Monday night into Tuesday. It's not until Wednesday that temperatures rebound during the day, getting close to 50 degrees. But again, look at those low temperatures. 25 Wednesday night into Thursday. 18 degrees, the low Thursday into Friday, before potentially another round of some icy and wintry precipitation next weekend. Not coming up now, but next weekend. So we could see a couple of days of treacherous travel across southeastern North Carolina. If you told me right now I had to decide what the most likely situation would be, it seems like things are trending for more rain than ice in the immediate coastal plain here across North Carolina. As you head more inward, you would see the higher probability of ice and a major ice storm brewing across almost all of North Carolina besides the immediate coastal areas. We'll track this throughout the day today. There is a state of emergency that has been declared by Governor Josh Stein. The DOT has a press conference coming up at 11 o'clock this morning. So we'll keep an eye on these model trends and see if the U.S. model kind of goes the way of the European or the other way around. The European starts coming more in line with the U.S. We should have a pretty good idea by tomorrow exactly what this is going to look like. But again, very dynamic system, and the difference between 1 and 2 degrees temperature-wise could mean the difference between getting, an inch of rain and potentially a half an inch of ice, which is obviously two very, very different impacts. Nevertheless, there will be a major ice storm across the southeast U.S. The question is going to be, where does that line set up? What areas see freezing rain and what areas see just regular cold rain, I'll note, but not of the freezing nature. So make sure you are prepared for this weekend. If we do get this bad ice storm, likely power will be out for, it could be multiple days, depending on how long things take to warm up and how long it takes for them to get crews out on the roads. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll do a final look at this forecast tomorrow, and if need be, some additional coverage over the weekend right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that is going to do it for a Thursday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. Also, now, weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We'll be back here tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., right here on The Nick Craig Show.